not all businesses are ready for VC funding because VC has certain criteria that you need to have a high growth rate because the funds has a lifespan of 4 to 7 years, and they want to exit within that kind of time frame.
Welcome to the Getting Funded podcast by iSearch. Today we have Whei Meng, the CEO of Speedhome, on the show. So Speedhome is a property rental platform that helps landlord and tenant to rent and let a home in an easy, safe and fast way. So today I'll be discussing with Whei Meng on how Speedhome managed to obtain 14 million in funding. So welcome to the show, Whei Meng.
Thanks for having me on board.
Okay, so let's begin. So could you share about the story of Speedhome and also what are the problems that Speedhome aim to solve?
So we started 2016, end of 2016, and what we were seeing was there wasn't a very automated ways of renting, and more importantly, the whole rental market was very much focused in agents helping out to lease houses. There wasn't an alternative where it empowers landlord and tenant to go direct. So with that, we see a gap in the market and thought that, if people are getting more and more IT savvy, we should build tools around home rental to automate the processes so that everyone can rent it easily. So that's the starting of Speedhome. And then we gradually found that Malaysian savings rate were low and that a lot of tenants starting to struggle paying the deposits. While as many landlords wants to close the deal, they were stuck with the risk of not getting deposit, right, or reduced deposit. So a lot of deals did not materialize. So we saw another gap over there. We decided that, hey, why not we do something different, a zero deposit on our platform, and we work with insurance alliance to protect the landlord. So that's in essence how we started the whole model, and it became the key business model of our Speedhome.
Okay, so very interesting, zero deposit model. That is something that's quite unheard of before Speedhome in Malaysia.
Yeah, so when we started off, we have been called crazy and we are biased to tenant. These are a lot of the common comments. But now I think we have started a new movement where you can see a lot of other different platforms or sublet operators specifically. They are starting to embrace a zero deposit because they saw the problem or the pain points of the tenants, and obviously they want to figure out how to lease out their units fast, right? So right now, more and more landlords also see the benefits of it because it's not really without any protection. There's insurance there to safeguard that. Apart from that, we screen the tenants. We ask for bank statement, pay slip, and we get their financial data with the tenant's consent, of course, to screen the tenant in a very unbiased solution. So I think that people see the value that we are offering. So it's not just as the headline says zero deposit, but actually there are a lot of checkpoints along the way to mitigate the risk.
Okay, I think it's a really great deal for the tenant because they get to pay zero deposit and they get to rent the home. But on the other side, what about the landlord? What's the benefit that they get because they have to forego that zero deposit? So how are they protected in a way?
Yeah, so if you think about the purpose of deposit, right, the key deposit is to safeguard landlords if there's anything happens, right? There are secondary reasons where people want the cash flow or whatnot, but I will not go into that, but I will just focus on the primary intention of a deposit. So typically deposit, again, like I mentioned just now, is to safeguard the landlords if something happens. And so typically the deposit is used to, when a tenant stop paying or run away or damages to the house or utility bills, then landlord will actually deduct the deposit and before refunding the remaining balance to the tenant. So the concept is quite similar to insurance, like car accident. When something happens, then insurance step in and help to pay certain bills, right? So in the Allianz insurance policy that we work out with, it includes 2 months rental loss. So that means if the tenant runs away, you get to claim 2 months. That is equivalent to 2 month cash. Utility deposit, people normally take half a month to 1 month, and Allianz cover up to 2,000 ringgit. So I think in most of the houses, I would say it will between 1,000 to 2,005. Anything more than that is more of expat market, right? So that is equivalent to almost 3 months of rental, or equivalent cash to cash basis is equivalent to the traditional deposit that landlord gets. And what differentiates us significantly is where there is household content to theft and damages, where if tenants stole your sofa or TV or broke it maliciously, not wear and tear, just to be clear, then you can claim it from insurance up to 30,000. And that would really give you a more holistic coverage compared to traditional deposit.
Okay, great. Now I see the benefit from tenant and also the landlord side. So for Speedhome, you started in end of 2016 until 2021. So is there any pivot in your sort of like your business model during these past 5 years? Or is it you start out, this is the way that you wanted to plan it out?
No. I don't think we ever envisioned us to be like this. I mean, we knew that we want to do end-to-end. So apart from just, insurance is our key monetization strategy, where we upsell the landlord on the insurance. But we have a lot of, as I mentioned from the starting, that we want to focus on automation. So, for example, after the tenants agree to rent a house, then you basically go through a lot of processes whereby you need to sign tenancy agreement, you need to stamp the stamp duty, you need to rental collection and all those. So those are all already in our platform as a complimentary service to the landlord. So typically it's fully automated. So that foundation was pretty much from the get-go. We wanted to do something end-to-end because I felt the pain as a landlord myself. So that's where we started off. The whole business model on insurance, all those, I think we pivoted 3 times, but it's all surrounding zero deposit or ease of allowing tenants to move in.
Okay, yeah, so great. So let's move on to the funding process. So Speedhome has raised about 14 million from a combination of Equity Crowdfunding, VC, and also few listed companies. So could you share how's the funding journey like, having gone through so many different types of funding?
I think each stage have a different expectation. I started off with my own seed capital. Then we got faith co-founders, Joel and Chen Chao, they invested. And the discussion was very simple. They just get to know me, and then we chit-chat a little bit, and then they just gave us the money. I mean, it's not a huge sum, but, it's very simple. Then, as we move on, we started to raise funds. At that time, because our business model was unheard of, and a lot of VC say it's a lot of risk, so they didn't invest in us. So we went to tap our customer base. We talked to our customer base to invest. And obviously, back then there wasn't ECF, Equity Crowdfunding, to speak. So we started it as well. We spoke to our customers, and 8 or 9 of them actually gave us like minimum 50K per person. That's how we raised 400 plus thousand. Then after that, 500 startup came in. I think at 500 startup, it gets more professional in the sense where they want to do due diligence, they understand the business, what's your cash flow forecast, and so on and so forth, right? So that's our first institutional investor. Then that's when Equity Crowdfunding was formally introduced in the market, and that's where we went on to go into the market, where you found that the question that retail investor asks and institutional investor asks is very, very different. And a retail investor would ask a lot more I wouldn't say it's basic, but they are not focusing on the future. They are more focusing on what have you done and how do you reduce losses and stuff like that. Whereas we have to educate them that being in the new economy, companies, a lot of them are loss-making. And the reason we are in loss-making are for two reasons. First of all, we are prioritizing growth to profit and loss. And predominantly the reason is if you can use cash to buy time, which means to shorten your time to a certain size, most of the time is a good swap, a good trade-off, because time is super valuable, right? And if you can get money to raise against the time, then I think it's a good trade-off, so long you know what to do or what you are doing. Yeah, so then public listed company, and then I think the subsequent 2 to 3 rounds was quite similar until this round with Gobi and Allianz. That's where they're starting to ask a lot of things, a lot of due diligence in terms of compliance. Where do you foresee in 5 years and all those projections? Or I think transitioning from a retail investor to institutional investor is a lot different in skill sets and expectation.
Okay, so for first-time entrepreneur, which funding sources do you recommend to get started with?
I think there's no right or wrong or where you get funding from. I think if you want to start a business, the easiest is family, friends, relatives, right? Those are the least resistance in terms of getting funding. But not all businesses are ready for VC funding because VC has certain criteria that you need to have a high growth rate because the funds has a lifespan of 4 to 7 years and they want to exit within that kind of time frame. So if you are growing, let's say you are building a cafe or coffee shop, right? Those we won't typically call it a scalable business, and that won't be something VC is interested in, right? So different business has a different strategy in capital, but ultimately, if you ask the easiest capital to get from, is certainly from friends and family.
So do you know, like you say that when you first started without any growth yet and you spoke to the Faith co-founders, Joel and Chen Chao, so are they your existing friends or they just approach you and offer to give the first funds?
I think it was part of the reaching out for funding exercise. Then somehow or rather people will connect here, connect there. Oh, I know this guy may be interested. It's basically a lot of through referral. So I got connected with Joel through a primary school mate who made another introduction and made another introduction. So it wasn't a direct first degree, introduction. It was after multiple rounds, then you somehow get connected. So the time, and you don't know who is actually in the market who is interested in investing. At least back then, I think right now it's more transparent, or you go LinkedIn, then you can find some keywords and then you can find them. But back then it's just 4 or 5 years ago, it's very different.
Okay. And one more interesting one that I pick up is the listed companies. So how do you get listed companies to fund Speedhome?
So I need to credit Paul, who is our PR guy. And he was a journalist before, and so he had a lot of stack of name cards interviewing all these public listed bosses and so on and so forth. So he started mass mailing to all, and that's how we get introduction to few public listed. That's for IGM specifically. For Allianz, we have worked with them for the longest time, right? So we have known each other for very long, and we work very well. So I think it was a relationship building throughout the years, and they see the potential of the business and our growth trajectory, so they felt compelled to invest in Speedhome.
All right, great. So having raised 14 million, how do you plan to utilize these funds?
We are looking to expand to Bangkok, so that's most likely it will be Q4. A lot of it will be into tech enhancement. So a lot of things, being a tech company, we felt that investing too much in marketing doesn't make, I think as much as possible we want to invest in tech to increase our competitive advantage against any new competitors. And in fact, we have seen quite some new competitors in the market. So we want to have a technological edge compared to others.
Okay, so currently you're just in Malaysia or you're in other countries as well?
We are just in Malaysia. Thailand, specifically Bangkok, will be our next destination.
Yeah. Just curious, why Bangkok?
Many ask us this question. Well, I love Bangkok. So it's a good excuse. But on a serious note is that Malaysia and Thai has a very similar rental culture in terms of deposit point of view. So compared to Jakarta, there are still practice of paying 1 year upfront of rental. So that is very different. So we didn't think that we can just clone our model. So then we also look at the population size, and Bangkok is the second largest city in Southeast Asia. So that's why we said, yeah, why not just go Thailand, right?
What about Singapore?
Singapore is a too small market. And and because a lot of the rental transactions require, if a rental market is very much local, as in locals to rent it, expat is always a very small niche. And if you look at Singapore, home ownership is over 80%. So the market size is too small.
Okay. So what is your number one advice to entrepreneurs who wish to raise funds for their business?
Well, I think you need to have a solid business model. I will quote Clarence from Easy Parcel. He said, I don't build a business to raise funds. I build a business, people fund me because I have a good business. So I think that is a very fundamental thing where people, when they start business and they always looking for funding. But actually it's the other way around. You need to build a solid business plan or a solid business model, and you have the compelling factors that can be successful, and you attract capital. So don't build a business just solely for fundraising. It won't work. Yeah.
So I mean, of course, this topic is very broad. Like, how do you build a good business model? But is there any like tips that you can give to entrepreneurs? Let's say a few tips.
Well, from you first of all, you need to think. I think there are a lot of entrepreneurs who started off thinking solution to a problem, but whether the problem is worth solving is another thing, right? Like for example, keyboard. Why is it structured in QWERTY in such a weird way, right? So people may think of that I'm sure there must be a better way for more efficient typing, right? So that is a problem. Then you think of a solution where you build a super keyboard that's ergonomic and can type 10 times faster. But the challenge of you doing that is, but nobody thinks it is a problem, and it's a global phenomenon. People are used to this. So you would have to change and educate the market, which is very tough, right? So I think, so whether the problem is worth solving is something that everyone needs to think about. Second thing is whether people, if your solution, suppose it's worth solving, then whether people, your product or services is worth paying, right? So, like for example, everyone needs oxygen, but nobody wants to pay for oxygen, right? Except you are in COVID or whatever lah, right? That is a very special situation, but that's a service or a problem that nobody wants to pay for. Then obviously, then the last is whether you can be the best, right? If you are building a startup, especially when we are talking startup is high growth and tech business, a lot of the time when we say is winner takes it all, especially in consumer market, right? So if you can't be the best, you will be nobody. It's not like a cafe, I make the second best cafe, but in this area it's just me as a coffee shop. So people have no choice, they come to me. Right? So it's a very different thing. So you have to be the best, and really people willing to pay for it, and the problem is worth solving.
Okay, great tips. So to wrap up, is there anything else that you would like to share with the audience before we go?
Well, I think it's a very tough journey. I mean, I've started multiple business myself, and fundraising, in my previous businesses, I didn't raise fund at all. It was mostly self-funded or profitable business. So coming into this fundraising is a very new territory to me. So it's not easy. So I think everyone needs to understand that. I always sometimes also question myself, why is it so hard to raise funding? And I always think that I have a fantastic business or whatever, right? But not everyone sees it the same way. So you just need to continue and continue and continue until one day you succeed or one day you fail. So
Okay.
part and parcel.
All right.
Yeah.
So persistence it is. So thanks, Wei Meng, for coming onto the show. Check out Speedhome down below, and I'll see you in the next episode.